Hello, everyone. Randy Harrington here. In this episode of my YouTube, I am bringing to you a gentleman named Ernie Davieau, and he had an encounter almost 40 years ago. So it's going to be interesting. There's some aspects of his encounter that involve behaviors that it's taken me a long time to get to. He witnessed this in his first encounter. So he had to sit on this information and probably be ridiculed and just, you know, try to explain it to people, 40 years ago, and you would be laughed at. So we've all come a long way in our understanding of the intelligence of, the Sasquatch or Bigfoot. So, you know, this is going to cover not only his encounter back then, which like 37 years ago. So that's how long ago it was. So you're going to listen to his encounter and how it got to that point. And then he and I are going to discuss the aspects of it and how it compares to things that we know now. I'm not going to say we know, but we've experienced and assumed to be true. So I really hope you enjoy this. It involves a Bigfoot using hand gestures and pointing and almost using sign language. It's really an incredible story, but you're going to have to take it on yourself to whether you can believe what you're being told here. I believe it to be 100% true. And don't base that on knowing Ernie myself. I base that on it matches what we've had happen to us. Shane and I have had happen to us at the 400 as far as intelligence and tactics and maneuverability and just all of those things that can't be done without being able to communicate, and sometimes communicate quietly in the dark, maybe using hand signals. Who knows? But please enjoy this interview. I know I did. There you go.
Yep.
I can see you now.
Cool.
They make tech so complicated.
For me,
Well, I
not
guess
for
the
other
the more we use it, the easier it gets. So, what'd you think about that video with my daughter last night?
I thought it was pretty darn awesome to tell you the truth.
Well,
I think,
I think it'll fit nicely with what you and I are going to discuss with what you saw, and it lets people segue into us taking a deep dive into their ability for tactics and strategies and
yeah.
things like that. I watched a podcast where you gave your encounter when you were hunting that day. But what I would like is I would like you to go ahead and just give us that story, even though now you have a lot more knowledge about what happened that day
Right.
than say when you were telling the story a day later. But now, after you've heard more and you've learned more and you've seen more, you certainly can retell the story now with a lot more
Yeah.
knowledge about the subject. But go ahead and just tell it, because I want to have a deep dive about what you saw them do specifically. But first, people are going to need to be acquainted with your story, from
Oh,
your
so you
point
want
of
me to
view.
go right from the very beginning about when I first started that hunt that morning?
Yes.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, I just approached that hunt like I approached every other hunt. That morning was a very special hunt for me because it was just about the last day of hunting season in Massachusetts.
What
Uh,
day? What year?
it was the first week of December, and I figured the year was probably 1986, 1987, something like that. Okay. But there wasn't any snow on the ground. It was like frost, sporadic frost. And I had figured out that the where the deer were going to be bedding down, possibly bedding down, because I had gone in there and done a lot of tracking and putting all that stuff down on a topographical map. I had been in there many, many times hunting previously, but I decided to come up the back side of the mountain. The front side of the mountain had a lot of apple orchards on them, and so it drew a lot of deer. And of course, it was heavily hunted in the surrounding area on the Southwick side and the Connecticut side, so it pushed a lot of deer into that area. Um, I didn't realize how steep in history it really was in there. I didn't pay any attention to it. I washed a lot of things off my mind about going in there, even by myself. I had a sidearm on me. I had a 12 gauge semi-auto on me, loaded with slugs. But I had proceeded down an access road off of the Granville side of the mountain, the Granville Reservoir. On the opposite side, where I parked, was the Cobble Mountain Reservoir, and that has a story all of its own in there. But that morning, I had gone in, walked in. I My marker was what we called Indian Rock. That was painted three different Indian faces on the rock, and I would use that as my marker to how far down I had to go before I took my left to go up Drake Mountain, which I proceeded to do. And as I got up towards, I'd say three-quarters of the way up, that's right where I jumped a deer. There was a place that I called Stonehenge. Yeah, the boulders are huge. One of them is marked off on a trail guide map for the Massachusetts Hilltown Hikers organization, and it's a 40-foot boulder that's up there. But where this was three boulders right in that little area, and you could probably have put like maybe uh I'd say a 24 by 24 tent in between those boulders. Okay. And I had seen sign that the deer were going in there, they were laying down. So I planned on jumping them that morning right there and probably getting my shot off. So going up that off of that access road, I had to take that left and go up, and that was an old like a fire road, but it turns out that it was at one time part of what they called Unkemit's Path. All right. And that's goes deeper into this story with all the sightings that actually have happened over the years up there. But as I got up near those boulders, they jumped. I heard the deer jump up. It's unmistakable the way that they move when they get up off the ground. And at that point, I knew what I had to do is I had to, because that path there that I was taking actually hooked back up, and it followed the top of that ridge uh, straight over, going towards those apple orchards, and that's where they were headed. So I figured that what I would have to do is try to get out in front of them by watching where I'm stepping, because there was a little bit of frost. The rocks were um, I don't want to say treacherous, probably not treacherous for me, but if somebody was not watching their footing, they could have had a little trip and fall, but I had done it hundreds of times, so it didn't bother me. But I started two-stepping. I started going toe heel when they moved, and I would try to move out in front of them. They were on just on the opposite side. I was paralleling them. They were just on the opposite side of that ridge line. So I couldn't see them, but I could hear them moving straight out. And foresight is everything, I guess, but it sounded like there was something on the other side of them, keeping them going in a straight line. But it didn't bother me because I had seen deer, does actually push a buck, one get on one side, one get on the other side, and actually push that buck in a straight line to bring him back around to the rest of the group of deer or whatever. Um, I was watching my wind direction, which was blowing straight into my face, not towards them. And as I got up towards the top of it there, the wind started blowing cross face to me. So still, it was not blowing towards them. And I had managed to get out front of them. Probably I had to circumnavigate probably, I would guesstimate 150, 200 yards to get out in front of them. And I knew exactly where they were going to come through. That path went straight ahead, and then there was one part of the dog leg back down the other side of Drake Mountain. In between that dog leg and the path that I was on, there was a stone wall right there. And on one side where they were, there was a lot of browse, like little saplings, beech nuts. On my side, there was some big pine trees there, big thick pine trees, not close together. They were spaced out, so I knew I was going to get a good clean shot right in there. As I got to that point, as I was maybe I'd say like maybe 15 yards of that point, I was really watching that area because it was kind of open. I didn't want anything, a rabbit or a squirrel to panic and run or a grouse to go up and alert those deer. And there wasn't anything there, Randy. There wasn't a blessed thing there, you know. So I took up my position, knowing, still hearing them coming, and I knew they're going to come over that stone wall. So I just kind of scooched down just a little bit to take up a good firing stance, but just I lowered myself down, not on the ground, but I just lowered myself down to get ready. I didn't want them to see me until it was too late as they came over that stone wall. It was about at that point right there that in my peripheral on my 9 o'clock at about a 35-yard mark out. And we've actually, Sibylla Irwin's actually able to measure that on advanced Google Earth. And I believe she measured it at 38 yards from where I was to that tree. And I noticed something at the base of that tree. And it appeared it was relatively good sized body, but I thought maybe I had not seen it when I had somehow inadvertently overlooked it, and I thought maybe it was a buck laying there, and figuring that the bucks might not be traveling with them, particularly this time of the year or whatever. And so I drew up on it, you know, and it started getting up. I had to let it get up because you can't take a deer in Massachusetts if it's laying down sleeping. Supposedly that's a story. Supposedly the wardens know because you have to go to a check-in station. They take some of the meat or whatever, a little piece of it, and test it for diseases or anything else. And I guess they can tell if you shot it while it was laying down or sleeping, probably from the rigor mortis or something. I don't know. But I could still hear the deer coming, and it started scooching up to the tree. I'm still trying to watch over that tree because this thing has to get up for me to shoot it. And the deer coming over there, I don't want them to also scare that one if it is a deer and it puts the tree between me and it. And so I'm kind of watching it and remaining cognizant of the deer over that stone wall. And it starts really scrunching up to that tree more. I'm saying that's not a deer, that's a big bodied animal. That's got to be like a bear, had its head around the other side of the tree. So that tree was now obscuring its vision from me, and I couldn't see its head either. And it was just a big bodied animal. And I figured it's a bear, but I can't take a bear. I had no bear permit. And at that range, I didn't want it to alert or bum rush me. I don't know if there's cubs around it or what's going on. So it was about that point that it started getting up a little bit more. I'm still trying to remain cognizant of them deer on the other side of that stone wall. And it started getting up, it was really, I could tell that it was more like a guy. Even though it had its head around the other side of the tree, it was more like a guy. And I hear a lot of people say, how can you mistake a bear for a deer or a Sasquatch or whatever? It happens. It happens. And it started standing up. And I said, man, if this guy, uh, if them deer come over that stone wall and they come between me and him, he doesn't know I'm here. He's going to shoot me. He's probably loaded with buckshot. That's big thing in Massachusetts. The woods are so dense. If you wound something, you got to go into Mount Laurel. You need to have buckshot on you or whatever. So I decided I was going to just scooch up just a little bit so I would be now in his peripheral. So when they came over, if they tried to come between the two of us, he would catch me in his peripheral and hopefully not fire. And it was at that point is he was like totally standing up against that tree with his head on the other side of that tree. And it was just absolutely the biggest guy I've ever seen in my life. I was right at that point right there. I was trying to put that peg in a hole. I've seen some pretty big guys.
Can I say
Yeah,
something?
yeah.
I myself am not a hunter. I've never hunted. And that seems odd that I'm so into, the Bigfoot research, but I'm telling you, you are giving a nice, clear, concise tutorial on how to do a hunt, to the way you move, the way you maneuver yourself, and you try to stay stealthy, and
Mm.
and when you thought that you might be dealing with another hunter, your safety is involved, his safety is involved. So
Right.
all of those things are things that you have to take into context with what's happening in the moment, and how to deal with each one of those things. So people should who are watching this video should understand all of the dynamics that's going on in your head before you see what you see.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I really do. Those are things that I just took for granted after learning how to hunt all those years. I grew up hunting with my family and everything since I was 7, 8 years old. I was carrying a shotgun when I was 10 years old, 11 years old, something like that. But this thing got up to the point where it was absolutely the biggest man I've ever seen in my life. And I'm still trying to put that peg in a hole. And I'm realizing that it's just way too big. It's just way too big. So I'm looking at the tree trying to find a little piece of branch or a knot or a piece of moss, and I spotted a piece of moss. Now his head was around the other side of that tree the whole time. It was right around at that point that all hell broke loose on the other side of the stone wall. It was a knockdown. It was a knockdown drag out. Those deer were definitely attacked. They weren't attacked by a bear or a cat or anything like that. They were attacked by something much bigger because I heard boulders. I heard boulders clacking off of boulders that sound like they're being picked up off a stone wall. I heard I don't mean branches, I mean limbs. And the limbs sound like if you ever watched a boxer punch a punching bag, a heavy bag, the thud that it makes. Well, if you took a baseball bat and hit one of them punching bags, that's what I was hearing on the other side of that stone wall. But I had spotted that piece of moss, and I took a note of that piece of moss right where his head was. And it was about at that point there that all this was going on, that he had his right arm and hand around the tree, on my side, and he stuck his head around my side of the tree, but he was still looking straight ahead over that stone wall. And the second that he looked over that stone wall, he looked over at me. He looked back over the stone wall and he snapped his head right back at me. He caught me in his peripheral. He caught me in his peripheral, and he couldn't believe that I was standing there. Um, and this knockdown drag out was still going. It sounded like they came out of the trees. You know, I knew instantly what it was. It was standing there in front of me, and I had my 12 gauge pointed right at him, right at his chest. I guesstimated 35 yards, but there was no way that I could have missed. This thing was just completely massive, even at that range, massive. And even though I didn't really, I believed in them, but I washed it away a long, long, long time ago that, yeah, there maybe there's a pterodactyl flying around, but it was the only one, and now they're all dead. And that one there, well, Patty was out in California or whatever, and there's no way I'm going to see that. And it's everybody's dream to see something like that when you're out hunting, get the biggest deer or see whatever. And
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
I, I
Can,
was just taken
can
aback.
Can I throw this in?
Yeah.
I don't know if you're ready for I'm thinking of this from the viewer's point of view. This is so fascinating to me, and it's so incredible to hear this. But I want to lay this out for the viewer who is not very familiar with. See, I know the end of this story, and you know the end of this story. They don't, but I want to set this up so that when you tell about what happens next, they already have in their mind what was happening. There was Ernie came up, and on the far side of that rock wall was apparently a Bigfoot hunting party that had been running the deer up that ridge on the opposite side of him, coming up the other side of that ridge, and unbeknownst to each other. So that the Bigfoot that Ernie witnessed was one that had moved into a tactical position to intercept any wounded deer that escaped the hunting party that was clearly a very efficient hunting group that was on the other side of that fence. So that's what we're at now. it it was actually eased itself up from around the tree because the hunt was already on and the attack was already on, and since a straggler hadn't come over the fence wounded, his job was just about over, so he eased himself out, and that's when he saw Ernie.
That's exactly correct. That's exactly what I had put together too, is that there was obviously more than one. And even though I had my shotgun pointed at him, I knew that there had to be more than one. But it was at that point that, I was trying to take absolutely everything in, and he fully stepped around to my side of the tree and broadside, looking right directly at me. And he put both his hands out in front of him, palms to the sky, elbows in about waist level. The hands were between the chest and the waist, just out a little bit, and he pumped him twice, and that blew my mind right there. Because I'm like, this thing is not acting aggressive towards me. It is the feeling that I got. It was telling me, hey, hold on a second here. It didn't mean me any harm at all, and it was winning me over. And later on in life, it bothered me, or after the encounter and everything, because, and I'll get into it, it knew how to approach me, and it started walking towards me, and it pumped its hands one time, started walking towards me, pumped them again, and I lowered my shotgun to half ready. That means I don't have the shotgun shouldered anymore. I've got it basically shouldered, but the barrel's pointed down towards the ground about 45 degree. And he kept walking towards me. And as he walked towards me a little bit more, he took his right hand, uh, closed fist, pointer finger out, again, chest level, and pointed directly towards my chest, right in the middle of my chest, right at your chakra, and then pointed towards his own. Almost like, and he did it very methodically, very, not really,
Deliberate. Yes.
very deliberately, like he wanted me to understand this, and I was concerned, why is it doing this? I've never heard of anything like this ever happen. And do they do this? I couldn't discount it, but it was pretty much around that point as I started thinking, I need to take everything in right now. I need to check my breath. I remember a plane flying overhead, going to Bradley International Airport. I knew where it was going. I knew the area. Um, I even checked the compass that was mounted on the stock of my great uncle's shotgun. A lot of people say, well, they don't work on. No, but I was checking it just anyway, so to get a lot of things going in my head. And he continued walking towards me, and he did another hand gesture to me. Is he same positioning with his elbows? His hands were now uh, out just a little ways, not straight out, but his elbows were bent a little bit in towards his waist, palms down. And I'm sucking it in right there. And then he flipped his hands up, and now my mind is working on, I'm taking in him, what he looks like, what he's doing, and I'm thinking to myself, I think there's going to come a time where he's going to want me to parlay this stuff back to him. This thing is trying to communicate with me for whatever reason that it is. And I've got to get a grip on myself and not freak out and screw it up, and maybe get myself a butt whipping here because I don't understand what's going on. And this whole time he's walking closer to me too. Now he does another hand gesture to me, because he did the hands down signal and the hands up, and I took that to mean, the first hand signal was to hold on a second, don't shoot. Obviously, it knew that it was a gun. The second hand signal I took is I didn't have any food. They didn't have any food, and they were looking for food, and that was pretty evident by what was going on the other side of that stone wall. And the third hand signal, well, the chest pointing to my chest. It took me a long time to find it, but I strongly believe that what that meant was is we're equal, we're brothers. I tell people if you walk into a bar, try to find the meanest, angriest drunk in the bar, go over and take his beer, and then men understand this, point to the chest and go, you and me, you and me, I'm going to get you or whatever. No, it was very methodical, very understanding. He was making sure that I got the information, and he pointed to the middle of my chest with his pointer finger. Um, when he got closer to me, those things became obvious to me. He did another hand gesture to me too. He pointed, I believe it was over my left shoulder and then over my right shoulder, almost like, and I took it to mean like, where did you come from? Because from the expression and everything, and by the way he was moving, I didn't take it like, you need to get out of here. Because I figured if he was trying to tell me that, that would have been from the get-go. That would have been, he would have bum rushed me, scared, tried to run me off or whatever. There would have been shots fired, which
Yeah. Well, can
I
I,
did.
since I've already listened to your story and I know where this is going, do you think in any way possible, because I think it's possible, could he somehow think he's preparing you for a second one that's going to step into view? And don't get excited. There's going to be another guy that's going to step in over here. So don't get too excited. Maybe he's telling you in his way to be prepared. There's another one that's going to be coming over here.
I did kind of get that feeling from what was going on. Um, uh, I also was getting the impression is like, because as he approached me with those hand signals and everything, he was checking me out. He just from the get-go couldn't believe I was standing there. He was totally like taken aback, like that look on his face was like, where did you come from? Who are you and where did you come from? And he already knew what I was, I believe, but how did you get there? Because I had to cross an open space. How did you get where you were? And all I can tell people is it was my frame of mind. I believe it was, is I was trying to duplicate the walk of a deer so that the deer would confuse me if they did hear me for another deer or something and not panic. That was my intention. So in my head, I was becoming that deer. I had to become that deer. And by pointing over my shoulders like that, I felt that he was actually saying, where'd you come from? And this whole time, I'm studying him. I'm studying his hair. He's close. Now he's close. I'm studying his eyes. He had blue eyes, his skin tone, the texture, everything about him. And that's when he was, in the past, I used to tell people it's probably 5 yards, and maybe because I was very uncomfortable with that. But I will tell you this, that anybody who's heard my story over the past 2 years, I had to look down. He put his hand out, his arm out, close to me, not at arm's length, closer than that, like again, um, elbow in, and placed it down between the two of us, palm up, and he pointed to his palm. And it was at that point I just started feeling really weird because as a fighter, I'm looking at the head, I'm looking at the shoulders, the chest. I want to know where his eyes are, what he's going to do, where his body movement is going to be in case I got to duck or move out. And at the same time, I'm dropping my hand to my sidearm, and my palm had just hit the grip on my sidearm, and he tapped his palm. He didn't just point at his palm. The first time he pointed, the second time he looked at me sort of kind of stern, and he tapped his palm. He wanted me to look at his palm. So I took my hand, of course, I took my hand off my grip because it was at that point also, I'm thinking to myself, A, he wants me to look at his palm. B, um, he knew what I was doing. He he knew what that was on my leg. I had a leg holster, a thigh holster. So if I dropped my hand, it looked normal. I didn't have to pick up a coat or anything. My sidearm was right there. And I took my hand off my palm off of my pistol, and I looked at his palm, and I was pretty much taken aback by what I seen on his palm. His palm looked just like our palms. Its palm exactly like it, except no lifeline. There was no lifeline on his palm, and I hear some people don't have a lifeline. Now, that's cool, but that's the only reason why I could figure that he wanted me to look at his palm. He wanted me to see that. He'd already called me his brother. I doubt very much that he wanted my sidearm. My only hope at that point, because I was below his shoulder, just above his bicep, and if things were to go south at that distance away from me, my only hope was to pull that handgun out and put it right up underneath his jaw, right up underneath his neck, and try to pull one off. But I figured that he was pretty he'd be pretty fast. He was extremely fit. It like I can't explain to people. You've seen wrestlers on TV that are what I'd say would be extremely fit. You yourself, Randy, are what I would say is extremely fit. Had I not seen this, these things were he was just ripped. I mean, completely ripped. Like this thing was working out with I don't know what boulders or something. I mean, incredibly, But it was at that point as I took up my gathered my thoughts and said I need to repeat back some of this stuff to him. So I repeated back to him that, like we're brothers. I repeated back to him that I didn't have any food. I didn't give him the signal that I wanted food. I gave him the signal that I didn't have any food to give to him. Had I had any food on me in my knapsack, rest assured, I think I probably would have taken my knapsack off and gave him a candy bar or something. That's the rapport that I was getting off of him. And then I did the hand signal over the shoulders. And it was at that point that he looked at me and he bowed his head, nodded his head at me, and he looked over that stone wall, kind of turned quarter turn away from me, looked over that stone wall. This whole time I'm looking at the hair on him. I'm not smelling anything. He looked pretty clean. I believe these things actually do bathe. I've heard reports. I've taken a lot of reports that they do, unless they're hanging around in these swamps with skunk cabbage and or cow pasture in the cow pond or whatever. But he looked over that stone wall and he put both his hands up to his mouth and he gave three whoops at exactly 1.5 seconds by my count in between each one, very deliberately. He didn't go whoop, whoop, whoop. He did whoop, long, loud, reverberating whoop right directly over that stone wall. Three of them, 1.5 seconds in between each one. And he looked back at me again, made kind of a little nod, looked back over to that stone wall, and he whistled. And I've heard that whistle before. It was just exactly the same as a human being's whistle. It's the kind of whistle that we used in hunting to maintain our distance and let other people in our hunting party know where we were or what we were really seeing. You could tell by the little whistle and everything, and it was more of a come here whistle, and he did an arm signal directed towards that, obviously, other one or others on the other side of that stone wall. And I believe that now there was way more than just the one that I'm about to describe too. Um, and he did that come here whistle, but he waved towards where he had just come from, out in that direction. It was obvious that he wanted them or that one or whatever to meet him up over there, to go over there. He looked back at me one last time. He bowed his head towards me, and he didn't run. He didn't speed walk. He didn't, uh, hard to describe, very, very, very fluid like in the way that it left my area back directly towards that tree and on a straight line out to about 55 yards. Again, Sibylla had measured that. I think she came up with like maybe 58 or 60 yards or something. And it was right at that point when he got there, he turned to face me that I heard, I knew for sure that this was another one coming. And it was from the other side of that stone wall. It was coming through the saplings. And it sounded like a freight train. And I don't know if it was a bunch of them that were in there that were just all scattering like cockroaches or what was going on, but it come through that beech nut grove over the corner of that stone wall in about maybe 15 yards, and then the path that doglegged around was right there, crossed that dog leg right there over the brook, and it had to be about at least 100-yard run from that point out to where he was. And it was the most. I've shot deer on the run, and I can tell you right now is that I would have had one heck of a time if I would have had to open fire on any of them that were running around like that. I don't believe it was running as fast as it could, but I will tell you this, that this thing was not what was described by some people I've taken encounters from. This was elbows and heels. This was parkour running. This was so fluid and level across a wooded area. I mean, there wasn't a lot of stuff in the way, but they don't. You maybe see a video of them and walking through the woods, and they're moving trees from somebody taking a video with a drone, and they're moving little saplings. They got no need to move a sapling. They could care less about a sapling. If they were that close to the tree, they're not using that sapling for a cover. They're going to walk right clean through it, or they're going to take the path of least resistance, but with cover. And it ran all the way out to that big one there, and it faced him. So it would have been on my right-hand side. The big one, I call him the big one, was on my left-hand side. Its hair was, you would think that it was black, because it did look black when I first spotted him. But having him that close to me in the sunlight hitting the hair, it was seemed to be a deep, 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 deep brown. It seemed like the sun was just hitting it and changing it just a little bit. It was that color, but its skin tone was like about the same thing. Although you could confuse it for being black, and that would be from its face to its hands, even the tops of its feet. It was just dark, like maybe ashen black or Jamaican colored. It was deep, but it took on a little bit of a different color in the sunlight. That being said, if you were at like 55 yards away and you've seen the same thing, you would think that it was all hairy, could be all hairy in there, unless the hair was really long or whatever. Um, that one come running up and it stood a little bit over its shoulder. It was cinnamon colored. And they had a little chit chat going on. I had never heard the Sierra sounds before, and I was just like, I think they're talking about me because they're kind of facing me. And when they ended the big one there, he pointed directly towards me, and the one that was a little bit smaller than him, he actually had to, him or her, I'm not sure, had to put its head down and look underneath a little branch on this little maple sapling that was in our way. And the big one pointed at me. So I think that he ratted me out, or he was telling him like, how the hell, how did, you know, how the hell did this, look at this guy over here. I'm just sucking it in. I'm looking at him going, I can't believe he's ratting me out like that.
Can I interject this?
Yeah,
I mean, and I'm probably totally wrong, but
no,
I get the feeling these are adding in all the things that I've experienced, especially at the 400 with the family unit.
yep,
Here's my take on just so far what you've said so far, and this may change. My opinion may change. You have a father figure or a large male father figure of this family unit. He's the one that you saw by the tree positioning himself. What if the other ones were just younger ones, younger part of the family, and he was monitoring the hunt, that they may not be as efficient as at hunting, but they still need the experience. So he positioned himself for the straggler that they couldn't quite get, and that never happened. So they did pass that test of being good hunters that day. But when the cinnamon one came up, that could have been Dad, and Dad was like, "See how easily we can be walked up on if we're not paying attention." And he might have been describing, giving the younger one a lesson about, this is why we've always got to pay attention. This guy slipped in on me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that really does. It makes a lot of sense, because even the little one did double take on me. You know, that it looked over at me, looked back at me, and snapped its head right back over, like it couldn't believe that I was standing there. So I couldn't believe I was still standing there myself. But I'm like, oh wow, So, like I said, I didn't hear the Sierra sounds, and up until I don't know, maybe a year later or so, and because I started checking everything out, and of course you're going to go internally too. You're going to like a guy was doing during the encounter, like, is this me and my breath? I'm checking. I even checked my wristwatch, and so it did a double take on me, and then the big one did something else as he pointed to that one's chest, and he did a semicircle with his hand to basically go around me in a big circle. And then he pointed to his own chest and did the same hand gesture back to my left in a semicircle. And it was at that point I was getting a little bit antsy there, as I couldn't figure out in my head and wrap my head around, uh why are you doing that? Because I was at that point is where I was going to follow them. I wanted to track them. I want to know where they were going. I mean, it's possible that they wanted to make sure I did not take their kill, okay, because they were looking for deer to feed their family or clan, okay. And they started to proceed to do that little flanking maneuver on me. And that's when I decided I had to kind of unfreeze a little bit there and go check that tree out to find out the how tall this being was, this forest person was. And I stood up against the tree, put my hand on top of my head, and then stepped back a little bit and then measured up from my hand using my other hand, of course. And I come up with 7 foot 8 inches and anywhere's north of 500 to 600 pounds, right in that range right there, and absolutely really, 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 really fit. Um, I decided at that point that I needed to look for a track because I wanted to make sure that if there was a track, that track corresponded, because he was taking a pretty good sized stride, like effortlessly, So I knew that he would that they could cover a lot of ground just from looking at that stride. And I wanted to measure the stride to correspond with the 7 foot 8 inches tall. In case this day ever came and people asked me, I would have that information. I didn't want to say, well, geez, I didn't do that. I mean, I didn't take a phone that day for obvious reasons. I don't want my phone going off. They weren't all that tech, uh, had all that technology way back then. It could have gone up anytime it wanted to go off. I think it was just the precursor to maybe even taking photos with it. So it was, darn,
Probably flip phone era.
it was a flip phone error. But uh, I I looked for a track and it was a Bernio pool. It was a little knoll right there near that tree. And I figured that's what that one did is he came through the knoll originally and crawled up to that tree so he would be unobserved by anything and use that tree for cover. So I seen some of the ferns in that vernio pool. They seem to be pushed down, matted down, no real indentation in the ground. So I decided to go by what I had seen with the matted down fern. And I took a kind of a jump, off of my position where it was standing last, and I fell miserably short of that. So I tried to give it a little bit more oomph and try to land in the track again, and that didn't work. So I backed up about 2.5 steps or so, and I just kind of ran forward really quick to jump into it. I wanted to do this quickly because I didn't know their true intentions. I just started my hair started standing up as like I was being watched or something. Some people asked me, well, why didn't you get on the ground and look down on the ground for to track. I mean, I know that trick, but when you get down on the ground, you better have somebody behind you because now you can't see anything. You know, a rock will be a mountain in front of you. You won't see a darn thing. So that's why I didn't do that. But I did a little run to start and did that jump, and I still fell short. So I knew that I knew that that had to be an accurate height, 7 foot 8 inches, and back then, over the past 3 years, it's changed quite a bit. When I first started kind of getting involved, people were saying, well, they're 15 feet tall or 25 feet tall or 30 feet tall. Well, perhaps so. Maybe, in Alaska or keep them out of snow drifts or Canada, that could very well be true. But this was 7 foot 8 inches tall. And now I'm hearing the majority of people, which is going to happen. People are going to try to glean anything that they feel is very accurate and truthful and try to fit it into a story for them because this is a field that people want to get into because they I tell some of the close people that I know it's like a bikers club. You join the bikers club because you have no family and you want a family, but you want to be able to fit in. So where do I fit in? So I need to maybe come up with a little story or something, or be wearing special things to make me look cool or whatever. So that all being said is knew at that time I needed to get out of that area. I had no intention, and people have asked me, why don't you go over and check for the deer? Well, my spidey senses were now telling me that I needed to back out of there, and I didn't go back the way I came. I actually I carried rope on me for a lot of reasons. I carried some survival gear on me for obvious reasons in a knapsack, and I decided what I was going to do is I was going to go down over the ridge, um, the hard part of Drake Mountain. And that way there, I knew that area, and I knew that if anything approached from the bottom, I could see it for roughly 500-600 yards through the trees from having the advantage of being up high, and get myself down. And if I had to use my rope to actually sling it around a tree for stabilization and to get myself down to the next little spot. And if anything came up from above me, be the only way you could come after me, I could use the trees for cover to get down lower. I didn't know anything about their capabilities, but they are very capable of a lot of things in there. I've come to learn a lot of things too, and I've talked to a lot of people, and it's 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 hard to get like you're saying, Randy. The more you talk about it, the more some things will be coming out, and that's what I do when I encounter some people that they don't speak to anybody else because they think that it's too nutty or whatever. This truly back then was truly mind-boggling. I could have gone down to the area bar and got myself a drink if I said I just seen one. Okay. But it had to do all of this. Yeah, you might get yourself locked up. Okay.
And
You,
if I would have heard this story even as little as a decade ago, 10 years ago, I wasn't where I'm at now. And all the experiences that we've had at the 400, where we've seen the product of the same
yeah,
mannerisms, where that involves tactics and intelligence
yeah,
and communications and choosing what communications are going to work for the opportunity. And most of those times it's nonverbal communications, which
yeah.
is incredibly intelligent. So you just put in a nutshell, by seeing it with your own eyes, all of the things that we've had to put together because of all the other evidence that we haven't seen visually.
Correct. And a lot of people that they've heard this story, but they kind of like for some reason they wash it off. Because my thing is, what's your next step? If one steps out in front of you, what's your next step? It should be communication. But you're exactly right. For back then, is people wouldn't know, but you and I both know now that they are far more intelligent than you make them off to be. I have opinions, very strong opinions based on encounters, eyewitness encounters, on they actually do things that we would have done, that Native Americans did, that they would take maybe the next young boy into out on a hunt, or maybe take him on a raid to raid another encampment or whatever, and he would get to watch what to do and how to use a tactic of scaring somebody to overwhelming them. And that's what I believe. I believe that they'll toy with you. They'll actually toy with you by maybe throwing an acorn at you and then have a little chit chat with each other and say, boy, watch Ernie run. I'm gonna whack him with a pine cone or something, you know. I really believe that. The intelligence of these things are, people say, well, there are no experts. Well, there's a reason why you don't have any experts, okay, just yet, because you don't have the body, and you shouldn't have a body in one of these. People say, well, why hasn't the government come out and talked about them? Look at it like this. If these things are exactly what I'm saying they are and what Randy is saying they are, then that would classify them as a people, not an ape, as a people, and we would have to set aside land for them. Since when did our anybody in authority set aside land other than maybe a reservation for somebody? And how
And
would you?
you are completely deluded if you think the government is actually the one that would make that decision. They're not the ones that would make that decision. It's the
Right,
logging companies that lobby with enough bribery money to the
right,
lawmakers. They're the ones in charge of the forestry lands and the things like that. So they're the ones that if they need to have certain things done, they just
right.
drop a little more money to the senator that needs to pass a bill that they'll slip in the next bill so they get what they want. We all know that the government is owned by corporations and owned by lobbyists and owned by we don't even need to hide that anymore.
Yeah.
So that we might as well just take that off the table. The government's not even probably a part of it.
Exactly. I mean, the area that I was in, that particular area, we used to hunt and fish it all the time, and it was closed off by the government or whatever. And I've had friends that were in there fishing, and they've sent a helicopter in there to get them out of there. That they're not supposed to be in there. They'll take them right off the ice while they're trying to ice fish that little area in there and stuff. Well, I had gone in there one time many years after I got out of the service, and we were going to go in there and get a couple trout, my buddy and I, and we set up a lean-to up on a ridge, and we put our poles down there. There's a way you can do it so you don't have to worry about the fish just eating your bait and getting away. But we got up on that ridge, and we weren't there very long, like maybe I'll say 15 minutes. A helicopter came in. They never got us out. We managed to get ourselves out. But here's my point. Okay, they knew exactly where we were. They just couldn't see us. They knew exactly where we were, and the only way they're going to know that is with ground sensors. And if you know, and I know that from being in the service, if you know that I'm in there because they're triggered by weight, then you know that these other things are in there. And there's been a lot of accounts in there. I've heard things. I won't name any organizations or any people, but they'll say, well, you can figure out the Sasquatch population by the black bear population. Well, you don't believe that, because if I were to believe that, if I were to say, yeah, that sounds right to me, then I've taken 8 eyewitness accounts right within a 15-mile area where I stood. I was in the epicenter. I know for a fact, and there's a researcher in there right now. I know for a fact that there's family unit in there, and therefore and I know that there's also clans in there. So I'm going to say, let's say, 10 of them have been seen in that area. That would be 10 times, what's that, 200. Oh, for every 200 black bear, there's one Sasquatch. I got to tell you, that's a lot of. I shouldn't be talking right now. I should have been killed by black bear.
Right. Well, and it's funny that you're covering that part of this subject. First of all, there's no way in hell that any of the forestry services or rangers or anything aren't aware of these creatures. They have to be aware of it. But I think they understand the nature of these creatures, and it's so they've already decided a long time ago that well, it's in all of our best interest to keep it quiet The only way to keep it, we already know that they're reclusive and secretive and mainly nocturnal. So we don't allow any hunting at night except for coon dog hunting. Other than that, nobody really hunts at night, so we don't have to worry about that. Uh, so if somebody says they see one during the day, we'll just say they're crazy and poo poo on it. And that seems to be the standard operating procedure, even though they have to know that they are there. But when you're talking about comparing a 200 population of bear for every one, based on what I don't know, at the 400 location, which is only 400 acres, but it's surrounded by other thousands of acres. So it's not like they're secluded at this 400 acres. We've never seen any bear sign, never seen any bear tracks, but we have gone through multiple sets of youngsters growing up to adulthood and then moving on. There are many more of these out there than we can possibly be aware of.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I tell people. They say some people say, well, they're very aggressive. Well, anything can be aggressive. Anything, a little kitten can be aggressive with you. You have to remember, is it mating season? A deer, a buck, he's run off from his family unit when he gets to be a certain size. He's allowed to kind of hang around him, but he has to stay away. He can't just come nodging in. The doe will run him right off, the mother, the matriarch of the little group. I strongly believe that that's what's going on here. You're coming across a single set of footprints. It could be, I just call it a rogue male. Okay, he's looking for his territory. He's pushed away like a bear would be or a cougar would be, and he's looking for a mate. So maybe that's why we get the little screaming going on and everything during a certain time of the year. Um, or it's has a family unit and it can't move the family unit away. It's got to give them an opportunity to move away while it distracts you. It has to do something to get you out of the area so that they can get the little ones out of the area. I know over the years people have been saying how there's these structures and everything. Well, they're the same structures no matter where you go, but ironically, every animal marks its territory, including man. Even at a campsite, we kind of mark our territory. That's their territory. And then when you come across a glyph, they could be many things, but one of the things that it could very well be is the clan, the family name, the family name. Then
The
you have the
crest, the family crest.
the
Yeah.
exactly the family crest. We've seen, and I believe that the family units are like um, four, four to five. It'd be the older male, female, and then two offspring, perhaps maybe even three offspring. It's like a deer. Some deer will only have one fawn a year. Some will have two. Maybe the first time they might have three, but out of them, only one will live. Generally, the other ones won't by whatever means, by predation or weather conditions or whatever the case may be. I believe that's what we have here. We have something that's highly intelligent. They know how to take care of themselves. They know how to take care of their offspring, and they know what we are. They definitely do. I believe
Well,
the only
yeah, yeah. The interesting thing is, with your sighting, we can easily delve into how intelligent they are with communicating and clearly using tactics and maneuvers. And one instance I would like to bring up and challenge all the listeners who are watching this: how many reports have you read where someone is tootling along in the woods on a trail and they see a Bigfoot? And so they're fascinated and they see a Bigfoot, and then all of a sudden, off behind them to their left or right, they'll hear a big branch break and they'll look over and then they look back and the other one is gone. I would say almost 90 to 95% of Bigfoot sightings include those activities where a second one puts up a diversion. How many times does that have to happen for it's no longer happenstance, but planning? where
right.
they where they leapfrog each other on a trail to observe you going down a trail. They will leapfrog each other but stay separate for tactical reasons. And there should be enough in the records of how many times that happens for it to no longer be by chance, but because that's how they plan things. And that,
Yeah.
to me, when you have these observations where you gather that from the data, to me it just blows my mind that we can move forward knowing that these are much more intelligent than we give them credit for.
Yeah, but that's where we really have to be. We think that we are just way more intelligent than them. The tactics that they use, I was going to say something, I had a little brain fart going on here. It's exactly where you're putting it, and there's going to be a lot of people who are going to say, well, they can't be that smart. Well, they are that smart. They do know the tactics. We don't know. We didn't go to war school. Some of us, okay. We didn't partake in that on playing war games or anything like that. They've been at it for God knows how long that they've been at it. They know exactly what they're doing, how to lead you away, and if you still persist, how to get you out of that area. Um,
But
you know,
there is one thing that I can add on that I think that we've seen more than once that I think I can say is factual, is that when they move, when you're facing them, they move extremely slow, like a sniper would move, because
exactly.
they understand that we would see movement.
Yes.
Now, if that happens in daylight, you'd never see them. When it's happening with a thermal camera, I can see them and I see what they're doing. But the thing is, when we look away, even in darkness, when we look away, then they'll make their move. That tells me they think we can see at night the way they can see at night. That's the one thing they don't have quite understood. They
Ab-
I from that behavior caught on thermal camera tells me that they think we can see in the darkness too.
Absolutely. They're aware of the cams that people put on trees, okay, but they've never seen one on your head. They're associating that with the same with something that's on your head, like a light or something that miners used to use or coon hunters use. Okay. The other thing I want to throw in there is you'll have people say, well, Coco the gorilla used sign language. We taught her how to use sign language. Who taught them? And they're teaching their other ones. They're teaching their offspring about all
No,
that.
I know. Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because I've mentioned this on a few podcasts where you and I are speaking in the wonderful English language, and we understand sentences and prepositions and adverbs, and we can put this together and we can put our thoughts into words and even write them on paper because we all went through the same school system. Every one of us went through the first grade, second grade, all the way up through high school. So we all have the same understanding. What if we were living in the woods wild and had no access to our school system? We'd still be just as an intelligent human being, but we would have to learn things from those older than us teaching us. It wouldn't be the school systems. So
Yeah.
there's a huge difference, but yet it's the same.
Yes, we have. My family comes from indigenous peoples, and one of them was worked for the Hudson Bay Company. Now people have to imagine now that you have this trapper, and you have so many indigenous nations. Okay, some people want to call them tribes that are scattered around it. Okay, so you speak French Canadian, and maybe you learned a little bit of Lakota. All right, now all of a sudden you come across a Navajo. You you can't be learning all these different languages. They didn't even have to do that. They use sign language. There's a theory and I like using that word now because there's hypothesis and then theory. Hypothesis, prove it two times, and now we can go to a theory. Funny how we do it, but the scientific community does not do that. When you hear a lot of them speak at conferences, they're going, well, this is my theory. How did you get to that theory when you didn't even come up with a hypothesis and you're actually plagiarizing it off of somebody else's work? It's ridiculous. But we come up with the sign language, which you can use the thought level of the 100 monkeys, I think it's called. Okay, I don't know if you ever heard of that. The
Oh
100
yeah.
monkeys.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just leave that for the people to look up. They need to look up that 100 monkey. They're going to say, "Are you kidding me?" Well, you know what? Perhaps that they actually are so good at what they do, these forest people or these beings, that obviously what I'm uh, theorizing at this point, because the hypothesis has been proven to me, is these clans will come together during a certain time of the year, knowing that they have to take care of their elders because of winter coming on, because they might not be able to take a 100-mile trip to their next encampment because their food source changes and it's getting they don't want to use it all up in that area. Okay. So as they travel down, they come across markers of another family's territory. Okay. And maybe even a clan marker. So they enter into that area. Now what do they have? They have to be able to communicate themselves. So this 99th monkey now has to communicate with the 100th monkey. So they're all now learning different things on how to communicate with each other and leave markers for each other. Native Americans did it. The Boyers, they're called, that worked for the Hudson Bay Company, the half breeds. They also did it. Could it be? Could it be at one time that the Native Americans were actually trading with them? And we do have a theory on, I'll call it a theory on why it was broken off, and it was broken off by them, by Big Brothers. Okay. Okay. Is out of all the encounters that I've ever taken, I try to extrapolate information like Russell Easterbrooks has done. Okay. And say, what does this have in correspondence to what this has over here? And this is what I see, by a lot of the hunters and stuff. And the people are in the woods, we're very at peace. We become after, if you do it a lot, like yourself, after a couple of hours, you totally become one with the woods. You can hear further, you can see further, and you become at peace with everything out there. And you can feel everything kind of like accepting you, and all the birds and everything come around you. I believe that's what it is, because all these hunters that have had these encounters, that's their state of mind. That's where they were. Or people that are on these hikes, even they're with their families. They're totally into the moment, just thinking about the serenity of their surroundings and enjoying it. That's what's drawing them in. Yeah. And that being said, and this is why I recommended it to a few people, is they gift, but it's like when I was a kid, we didn't have the money, so we would make a gift. So it was a more precious gift than anything else. So what did the gift really mean that I was given when I was a child growing up? And what does the gift mean they are given? And should we return that gift to them in some manner other than just food, like total respect? One of the Native American traditions is to sage yourself, and if you do get something in the woods, a fish, or two fish, leave one fish for them, or part of the fish, the entrails, or whatever it is. Leave that for the birds or whatever. They see that reverence towards nature and they respect it. So,
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about they probably as a species, or or clan or group, probably 150 years ago, maybe a little longer, was probably actively trading with Native American populations to a certain level. So fast forward to 2009 in the Kiamichi Mountains, the early 21st century, and we had that walkie-talkie and photograph returned, and two rock cairns that we had lost on a Monday, and totally didn't even know we lost a photograph. So that was unknown to us until it was returned. But we did know we lost a walkie-talkie, couldn't find it. Spent the next day trying to retrace our steps through that mountain, trying to find the walkie-talkie. Blew it off because they couldn't be found. And then it was 3 days after that, on a Thursday night, that there were two rock cairns found outside of our campsite on the logging road. One of them had the walkie-talkie in it, and one of them had a photograph that we didn't even know that somebody lost out of their pocket. So,
wow.
so that's the first time I ever even knew that that was an Indian or a Native American concept. Rock cairns was where they'd leave things in a
That,
rock pile that had a cavity in the middle of it.
well,
Uh,
that gives me really draws my attention. I find it very interesting because this is what I'm thinking, just sharing it with you. What if, okay, this was a juvenile that took it, okay, and didn't want its,
Well, that's not how it happened, because we
okay,
we got to Honubby, Oklahoma at 10:30 at night, and we were down at Christ 40 Acres. So that's where our caravan was, and we loaded up and unloaded everything out of the vehicles, put them on
oh,
ATVs, and Polaris's, and then we went up through the mountains for about 5 or 6 miles through wet creeks and trails to get to a campsite that I had previously mapped out that we were going to camp at. So when we got to that campsite, one of the dudes pulled out his walkie-talkie and he was upset. He said, I lost one of my walkie-talkies. So it was on that first ride in, he lost it out of one of his pockets. And
Wow.
the other guy was an older guy on a four-wheeler that had the floorboards on it, not just pegs, but floorboards. And he had a piece of paper under his foot. And I said, Dave, I said, you're losing stuff too. And I reached down and there was a photograph. And he looked at it, he was like, what? And he put his hands in his pocket and there was a whole bunch of photographs. He said, dadgummit. He said, I haven't worn this coat for 3 months. And that's a pile of photographs that I took of my grandkids at a talent show at school. So
Oh,
they're like 20 or 30 pictures from taken way back in the auditorium. So they all looked the same. You couldn't tell what's on them. So he didn't know he actually lost one. But 4 days later, a photograph was returned to us and that walkie-talkie. So we didn't even know he lost a photograph on that trail. I just knew that there was one on his foot peg
so
when we
they knew
got to the
it was yours.
campsite.
It sounds
So
like they knew it was yours.
so they were following us. They were trailing us in there, and because we couldn't have lost them in the same spot.
Yeah. There's no way. It sounds to me just like they knew it was yours and they left
Exactly.
a marker for you to find. Wow.
Yes.
Wow. How brilliant is that? They knew
So
that you checked
yeah.
that out. They didn't just take it, they knew it was yours.
Well, I
Wow.
did. I've got a video about it. Shows the locations and shows it talks about everything that happened. It's called
Wow.
the walkie-talkie incident.
Now there you go. There's a level of intelligence right there on a whole new level. They knew that it was not theirs. They knew it was yours, that it had to be precious to you. So they put it where you would find it. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. It's a
If I would have found that, I'd be taken aback by that. Never mind even now. I mean, I'm totally taken aback by it right now, but it doesn't surprise me because I know how smart they are. But that's so when we're talking to people and they think that well, they're not all that smart. Well, I guess they really are.
man. I tell you what. I think we've been on this for
Yeah, yeah,
over an hour.
yeah.
I mean, I've got no timelines, but I do know that we really have talked about the subject that I was hoping that we could really get into because of what happened in your encounter, and that is just the intelligence level, the communications, the tactics, the
Yeah.
maneuverability, almost with military precision.
Yep.
And so the listeners and the viewers of this is going to have to determine amongst yourselves, is this true, or is what Ernie and I saying true? Because if you can't believe us, well then we might well not go any further. I want you to believe us, but then you're going to have to make the decision. So are we talking about something that is so intelligent that you better start thinking about them like that, because that's what they are. They are very smart.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've been pushing that for a long time now, and if people want to be serious out there, that's been the thing I've been pushing for 3 years, is that your next step is the communication, but you have to understand their level of intelligence. I know that this might not go over with some people, but that's okay. You're just learning how to make your pie. You're still unrolling the dough. Yeah,
We're just trying to put sense behind what we know is true. So
exactly. Yeah. Oh, one last thing too is that I came across in my area right at Drake Brook where that one crossed over. It was during the wintertime I had found where a hole was punched in the ice, maybe with a rock or something. And I was actually in there tracking, finding out where deer were going to be bedding down and everything. It was probably a year earlier or whatever. And I use a small pair of binoculars so I don't dirty up the trail or anything while I'm tracking, leave my scent. And I didn't see any tracks. So I actually scooched up to that brook because I was really wondering what made that hole in the ice. And then I was looking at the snow and I seen that the tracks were rubbed out. And I said, well, geez, you know, how were they rubbed out? Do I have a poacher in here? And of course, back then, I'm eliminating a lot of evidence that was back then. I was overlooking it, and a lot of people overlook a lot of things, or they might get that pareidolia or start thinking this or thinking that about something that isn't anymore. Don't let your mind get away with you. But as I looked to my left figuring this whatever it was had to be sitting right here. I seen a branch from a mountain laurel that was snapped off. It was obviously used to rub out those tracks and then thrown right back where it came from. And I'd have to say that that branch I had to actually move over a little bit because my arms weren't long enough to grab that branch, but it still never raised my eyebrows on, gee, it was a Sasquatch or the forest people, whatever you want to call them. So we overlook all this evidence, and this is something that you are presenting right now is don't look over this key piece of evidence that I've been pushing now for 3 years. This is a key piece, and I do have other people that have seen them use a type of sign language. It's not like American Sign Language. It's, I think, more primitive. It's pretty easy to figure out, or maybe they figured I was just that crazy and they needed to be real slow and easy with me, use something very easy for me that day. But
Yeah.
you're exactly right. It's just sensible. It's just thinking outside the box and thinking sensibly on what are you up against, in there? What are you hoping for to glean out of this? You
Well,
know,
if anybody follows my stuff at all, back in when I had my encounter at the Chickasaw Park, I was involved with a guy named Keith, and he was the one who kind of introduced me to a lot of the things back then because I was green, but I was wanting to learn. And he told me that he was following tracks one time in 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 the creek. You could see them under the water. And he said where they came out, there was drag marks, and up on the bank was a branch and he said that they were covering up their foot track. He said they couldn't cover them up, the ones that were in the water, but they could the ones that were out of the water, and you could see the branch that had rubbed them out and was laying up there on the side of the bank.
amazing, amazing. They know you're in the area. They just want to hide where they're actually sleeping or whatever, So very,
Yeah.
very, very interesting. Very interesting.
Awesome, man. Man, I tell you what, even before you and I had our discussion a couple of weeks ago, I appreciate you laying everything out the way it happened and letting us determine, what we're ready to absorb. And but it fits everything that where I'm at right now. And I appreciate what you brought to this subject, man.
I'll say one last thing, Randy. You don't have an average podcast going on here. This is not an average. This is a way above average podcast. This is more like watching National Geographic, where there's real stuff that's going on here. These people who watch this at some point today or tomorrow, try to discern which ones are really this is the factual stuff, between fact and fiction. This is a real thing going on here.
Yeah, no,
So
no doubt about it. I am a YouTuber. I've been involved in research for 20 some odd years. I want subscribers. I want the product to be exciting to people, but I also only want it to be the truth. I'm going to have a balancing act because I'm only going to attract the people that may only be looking for the truth.
keep it clean. There's very, 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 very few people like you out there. And I happen to know the majority of them. Very few who are really honest about what they're doing and keeping it real clean.
Well, that
So
means a lot, brother, and
yeah,
that means a lot to me, and that means more than to hear you say something like that.
I'm not going to stand behind a BS at all. Is a true researcher, and you guys, you and Shane are real researchers out there. Anybody who's going to go from not knowing anything about the woods to go out there and do what you're doing and camp out there and be able to walk out after a week is pretty darn good.
Yeah, pretty ate up is what I am.
Yeah.
But it
So
takes that. It takes that. You have to commit yourself if you're going to do this.
you have to
So
want to know.
yeah,
You have
yeah.
to really want to know,
All right.
otherwise,
Well, hey
okay.
man, I'm going to go ahead and hit the off button, but thank you so much. I appreciate you, buddy.
You take care.
All right.